On behalf of the business community, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome New York State incumbent Assembly member Kieran Lalor and challenger Laurette Giardino, and thank them both for being with us today. You can find a copy of the forum rules and a short bio for each candidate on our website, DCRCOC.org. Simply hover over our events tab and on the drop-down menu, choose the candidate forum option, which will bring you right to the page with both the rules for this morning's forum and the candidate bios. Also, under the events tab, you will find a list of 3 more candidate forums that the Chamber will host now through Election Day. Take note, there has been a couple of changes of dates on those, so if you were registered for them, we just encourage you to take a look to see what those new dates are. Questions for this morning have been submitted in advance by the community, Chamber members, and our Legislative Action Committee. Now, earlier, the order was chosen by drawing straws, and I'd now like to invite Laurette Giardino with opening remarks with 3 minutes on the clock. Laurette, welcome. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Laurette Giardino, and I'm running for New York State Assembly for the 105th District. I'd like to thank Frank Costello, the Dutchess County Regional Chamber of Commerce, today's sponsors, and their members for hosting this forum. Local businesses are the backbone of our economy and help to build this country. The 105th Assembly is a district of the largest in Dutchess County, representing 9 towns and almost 200,000 citizens. It's the district with the highest median household income in the county. Even with this economic strength, the 105th has seen many residents struggling this year. This year, I worked with 3 local food banks to help our neighbors who need assistance during the pandemic. The 105th District is a business community, is diverse. We have many small family farms like Fishkill Farms, regional businesses like Key Bank, and corporations like Mid-Hudson Regional Hospital. All these businesses have one thing in common. They are part of our community. Their employees, their families, and customers live and work here. I have lived here for 35 years, and I'm a retired business person. I was a full-charge bookkeeper and assistant controller in New York City and for regional businesses. I was a small business owner. I owned a video store in Hopewell Junction and was a publisher of an award-winning LGBTQ newspaper called In the Life. And I am familiar with the challenges facing small businesses. The coronavirus has caused a great insecurity and hardship for small businesses. As business leaders, we need to begin the rebuilding of our local and state economy. The state needs to work with businesses and organizations like the Chamber to find what businesses need to safely reopen and will help to stabilize our local economy and to grow. My platform focuses on improving access to education for all and to have educational programs that will meet the demands of businesses. In this country, many trade jobs go unfilled, and I want to bring back trade programs to our high schools and colleges. That will give young people an opportunity to have a good paying job and a future. My plans are designed to assist businesses and help people gaining training and skills they need. To help workers who have recently lost their job permanently due to COVID-19, so they may learn new marketable skills. By helping businesses get back on their feet, it will help move the economy forward, help the citizens of the 105th District. Together, we can restart the local economy, build a stronger and healthier community now and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We're putting 3 minutes back on the clock, and I now invite our Assemblyman, Kieran Lalor, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks to the Chamber for organizing this event and to the Chamber sponsors for sponsoring the event. Looking forward to a great discussion here. And I believe in the free enterprise system. My grandparents were immigrants from Ireland. They came here, and after my grandfather worked for A&P for a while, he opened his own small grocery store, which sustained their family for 4 decades. And my mother and her sisters and her parents lived in an apartment above the grocery store. My father was actually the original work-from-home person. I'm the 5th out of the 6 kids in the family, and the year that I was born, my dad turned our garage into an office where he operated his accounting practice for 3 or 4 decades until retiring recently. And I'm very proud to be a part of the free enterprise system, owning my local law firm here in Dutchess County. I'm a capitalist. I believe in private property rights. I believe that the American system and those who are entrepreneurs should be able to keep as much of their earnings as possible. I believe the federal and state and local government should be an ally of the small business and the entrepreneur rather than an adversary, as is too often the case. And I understand that the social safety net that we need isn't funded by government. It's funded by entrepreneurs and the private sector. I'm looking forward to getting into all of the details and answering the Chamber's questions about the challenges we face as a business community and as a state and as a country. But as we sit here in 2020, our system, our free enterprise system, is under withering attack. The entrepreneur is under attack, private property rights are under attack, and whether it's called socialism or democratic socialism or Green New Deal or redistribution or the more benign, everyone should pay their fair share, it's under attack. And elected leaders in our community, in our state, and in our country need to defend our free enterprise system because it has provided unprecedented prosperity to millions of people, generations of Americans, and people around the world. And I'll wrap up my opening remarks with one, I think, very clever quote from President Reagan, who said, "Socialism only works in two places, heaven where they don't need it, and hell where they already have it." Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both for your opening remarks. And we're now going to begin with our first question, and that will be geared towards Laurette Giardino. And that question is, between the years 2000 and 2010, the Tax Foundation found that 3.4 million residents moved out of the state of New York. That trend continues 1 decade later, including nearly 181,000 people moved out of the state in 2018 through 19 alone, according to the latest annual Census Bureau estimates. Forbes listed the state in their feature, "The state's people are fleeing" in 2014, and New York was the third highest moving out or outbound state in the United Van Lines 2013 migration study. Why do you believe this is a trend, and what can be done to stop the outflow?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. Unfortunately, we have been taxing the middle class and small businesses to the point we are taking the burden of all the taxes, and it's unfair. And that's why I want to go to Albany to change that. I want to stop the burden of us carrying this state. The ultra billionaires and multi-billionaires in this state have been getting away without paying their fair share. And that burden has fallen on us. So it's time that we need to start looking at them paying what they need to. Economists have said if they start even paying their fair share, it will help eliminate the burden on middle class and small businesses. We'll actually be able to lower the tax rate. If we could do that, that will help slow up the migration from New York, so people will be able to live here with not having the burden they feel now.
Thank you, Mr. Giardino. Next, Assemblyman Lalor. Between 2000 and 2010, the Tax Foundation found that 3.4 million residents moved out of New York. That includes, this trend continues a decade later, including nearly 181,000 in 2018 and 19 alone, through 19 alone. According to the latest annual Census Bureau estimates, Forbes listed the state in their feature, "The state's people are fleeing" in 2014, and New York was the third highest moving out or outbound state in United Van Lines 2013 migration study. Why do you believe this is a trend, and what can be done to stop the outflow?
I would sum up my answer with two main words: opportunity and affordability. We have dwindling opportunities for young people to work and build a nest egg, buy a home, and make a life here. And part of that is due to the lack of affordability here in our state. And while compared to other parts of the region, as you move south towards New York City, we're more affordable, but affordability is a big challenge here in Dutchess County. And a big part of the reason for the lack of opportunity and the lack of affordability are the decisions we make in Albany, the spending decisions that we make, and the regulatory decisions that we make. I've had conversations over the years and recently with chamber members and other business owners, and they say, even though they've been successful in New York over the last 30 or 40 years, they say something that's very scary to me and explains a lot about the out-migration. They say, even though I've been successful here, I would never encourage my son or daughter to go into business in New York State because the taxes are too high, the regulatory burdens are too high, the mandates on businesses are too high. And when you mandate businesses to do certain things like record keeping or pay a higher minimum wage, you actually hurt the small business and give an advantage to the big business, because the big business has the HR department, the big business has the law department, the big business can absorb the higher labor costs. The small business, the family business, the business that's operating on small margins cannot afford those added burdens. So mom and pop goes out of business and big box in some cases flourishes. So we need to make our state more affordable. That will create more opportunity. Our spending and taxing and regulatory decisions in Albany have to radically change in order to do that.
Okay, Assemblyman Lalor. New York is known to be one of the most generous states for government-funded retirement pensions. Many cite the cost of living and taxation is not affordable for retirees. Given the outward migration, this is an investment that most often leaves the state. What do you propose should be done to encourage retirees to remain here in New York, which in turn would keep more money in our own economy?
Based on my conversations with constituents and people in the community, the biggest thing that drives people out of this state in terms of policy are property taxes, school taxes, town and county taxes, our land taxes. Now we pay those bills to the town and the county, and about 70% of them to the school district. But a big reason why those taxes are so high, why those property taxes are so high, that someone who owns their house outright, mom and pop paid their mortgage over 30 years, they own their house outright, but they can't afford the taxes, therefore they have to move to North Carolina or Florida or Texas or Arizona. A big part of that is the mandates that New York State puts onto school districts and local governments. I've seen both Democrat leaders in Albany and my own party Republican leaders in Albany. They brag and they say, hey, we have the lowest personal income tax rate here in New York State since the 1950s, which is technically true, but they need to include a big but after they make that claim. What the state has done to have a low personal income tax, which I'm in support of, they have shifted the burden of doing things that maybe the state should do, or maybe the local government and school district should be able to decide whether or not they should do. They shifted that onto the local government without the appropriate funding. So they order the school district. For example, the school district has to have a seat on every bus for every kid in the school district. Now there's some kids that we know are never going to ride the bus. We could, in big school districts, you could get that down to a statistical certainty. So you have a school bus riding around that fits 6 kids, that has 12 kids on the bus day after day. But a state mandate says we have to have a seat and a bus for every child, even though we know there's going to be some empty seats or half empty seats. And that's one of hundreds of examples of how the state has shifted the burden onto local governments and school districts, driving up our property taxes. And that's why people who own a house, paid off the house, own it outright, cannot afford to live in that house.
Okay, New York is known as one of the most generous states for government-funded retirement pensions. Many cite the cost of living and taxation is not affordable for retirees. Given the outward migration, this is an investment that most often leaves the state. What do you propose should be done to encourage retirees to remain here in New York, which in turn would keep more money in our own economy?
Thank you. As a retired person, I am in that category of what it's like to live here. I know how hard it is with the taxes and with the various burdens. What we need to first of all do is build more affordable housing for seniors. I know as a senior, it's hard taking care of a home now. I would love to move into an affordable housing. The burden of taking care of a home for a senior is great. Paying the taxes is hard. So we need to also look at where our taxes go. Like the property taxes for education is disproportionately done on property owners. We need to look at other ways to raise money for education besides property tax. We need to find a way to distribute it into other venues. It's too much for a property owner to do. We need to look at many of the programs we have out there for seniors and see how they're not working for them and what we could do to improve them, as well as other programs that affect the community. This is not a simple solution that we could just solve with a wave of a wand. Everything, we need to start looking very carefully, talking to our local businesses, talking to our local residents, and to our seniors, finding out what we need to do to help them and what we could do to make those changes affordable for everybody. So I know as a senior, it's not easy. I love living here in New York, born and raised, and I don't want to leave. So I need to find ways for people like myself to live here. Some of the state programs that are supposed to be set up for help low-income and seniors is based on gross income, not net. Now, many seniors who, based on gross income, make just a little too much money, they can't get these programs to help them. Where if they base it on net, these programs would be able to help them. So these are things that we need to look at, how we could change these programs to make them accessible for seniors and for people on low income.
Okay. Ms. Giardino, there is a 30% minority and women-owned business enterprise mandate on state-funded contracting. Contractors have expressed that these goals are driving up the costs of projects, as well as forcing them to choose unqualified firms to perform work in order to meet the goals. What will or can you do to address this issue?
Well, that's the reason I want to start a trade program in our schools and high school and colleges, so that people, young women and minorities, as well as men, could take these classes, learn a good trade from a master person. What would they do? Start in the freshman, when they become a junior, go to school in the morning, in the afternoon, work as a master tradesman. And by the time they reach their 20s, they'll have completed their apprenticeship and have a good paying job in future. We have not taken the time to work to train young people in the trade fields. And then we ask them to perform these jobs. So yes, we are going to find people who are not qualified because of this. So we need to start setting up trade classes, even in our colleges, junior colleges, and 4 years. Once we start meeting that demand and these people start getting the proper training, then we will find these issues will no longer happen. And this is where I want to bring this into our educational system. Too many young people are falling between the cracks, who are not going to college and then leave high school with no training. And that's why I know that I understand where many of these tradesmen are feeling. But the issue is we failed the people in the county, in the state, and I'm working to rectify that.
Assemblyman Lalor, there's a 30% minority and or women-owned business enterprise mandate on state-funded contracting. Contractors have expressed that this goal is driving up the cost of projects, as well as forcing them to choose unqualified firms to perform work in order to meet the goals. What can and will you do to address this issue?
I don't think a business should be forced to hire a subcontractor because they meet some demographic qualifications. I think that's inherently discriminatory, and I think it's inefficient. Prior to joining the Assembly, I worked in the defense industry. I worked for a company that made armor and bulletproof glass, primarily for the federal government, but also for law enforcement and local entities. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of resources just trying to check these demographic boxes. And one thing that I learned is sometimes a company might nominally be owned by a female or nominally owned by a minority, but it is not, in fact, run by the person who qualifies for that demographic category. The real decision-making and management of the company is someone who doesn't meet that demographic. So what we're doing is we have this facade of we're giving set-asides for certain groups, but really the same people are getting the work, in many cases with this front operation. So we're getting the same work and really we're getting it in a less efficient fashion. So I think we should review those top to bottom. At a minimum, 30% is way too much. We should definitely review that, try to bring that down, and with the goal of ultimately eliminating it. And there's a real safety issue there. In your question, you said that something that I've heard many times, that contractors have a hard time finding somebody who fits a demographic category that is qualified to do that work. Well, if you're doing infrastructure work or something that involves a public project and you're being forced to get the contract, hire somebody who may not be qualified, might not have the adequate experience, you're putting the public in risk. So we have the government trying to help people, but at the same time, they're being less efficient. They're discriminating against some people, and in some cases, they could be putting public safety at risk.
Okay, this will be geared toward Assemblyman Lalor. As of last year, the governor has invested $5.4 billion of taxpayer dollars in a consolidated funding application process that has produced an estimated 220,000 jobs for a total cost of nearly $25,000 per job. Do you think this is a good economic development strategy for New York State, or can we do better?
We could definitely do better. What we've done in New York State, and it's part of the reason for the outmigration that we discussed in an earlier question, what we do in New York State, we've made New York State bureaucrats, sometimes the governor himself, the central player in our economy. It's a cliche for a reason to say that the government shouldn't pick winners and losers, but that's exactly what we do in this state. The governor and his staff handpick companies that will get millions of dollars. They'll get, in some cases, $1 billion. And there is a long list of failures on what I call the corporate welfare boondoggle list. Earlier this summer, a analysis by the New York State Comptroller came out and said the Buffalo Billion, where we gave $750 million to build a factory for Elon Musk, one of the richest people in the world, to build solar panels. We were told when we did that we would, for every public dollar invested, we'd get $31 in private sector match invested in that community. You know what we got? 54 cents. The public invested $750 million, and for each of those dollars, we got 54 cents back when we were promised $30 match per investment dollar. Those programs don't work, and what happens is they're impossible to get rid of, because if you say, hey, if you don't meet your goals, even though they're well-intentioned, say you have to meet a certain job creation goal, if you don't meet those goals, we're going to take away the subsidy. But you know what happens in reality? What happens in reality, the company says, well, if you take away our subsidy, we're going to leave. So even though we said in the case of Elon Musk, we're going to create 1,400 jobs, and we only got halfway there, just about with 800 jobs, if you take away my subsidy, you're going to lose the 800 jobs. So we create a situation where we're giving money to a company, and then we give them all the leverage. It's a terrible idea to have the state bureaucrats being a central player in our economy.
Ms. Giardino, as of last year, the governor has invested $5.4 billion of taxpayer dollars in a consolidated funding application process that has produced an estimated 220,000 jobs for a total cost of nearly $25,000 per job. Do you think this is a good economic development strategy for New York State, or can we do better?
We need to look at different ways to encourage businesses to come here. Giving them a blank credit check or incentives without having some type of recourse is not the best thing to do. Have we seen some other companies, when they end up losing their tax credit, they leave? We need to have some type of system where they have to stay or be penalized. And this is things that we need to look at. These programs are not working as well as we like them to, but we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What we need to do is to start looking how to improve them and to encourage businesses to come here to create jobs and to find ways to create small businesses to expand and to help them to grow and create jobs. So yes, we need to look at these programs. We need to see what needs to be done to fix them and work to have them working correctly to help our state and help the people here in New York.
Okay, Ms. Giardino, the Scaffold Law, enacted in the late 19th century, holds property owners, employers, and contractors absolutely liable for gravity-related injuries that happen on the job. This means there is virtually no defense from a lawsuit, even if the worker's gross negligence contributed to an accident. New York is the only state that still keeps this law and is estimated to cost taxpayers over $785 million annually. Would you support legislation to reform the Scaffold Law?
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
Certainly. The Scaffold Law, enacted in the late 19th century, holds property owners, employers, and contractors absolutely liable for gravity-related injuries that happen on the job. This means there is virtually no defense from a lawsuit, even if the worker's gross negligence contributed to an accident. New York is the only state that still keeps this law and is estimated to cost taxpayers $785 million annually. Would you support legislation to reform the scaffold law?
If anyone is negligent in their job or what they do, then they are liable for hurting anyone. So this law I'd have to look at very carefully and see why it's the way it's worded. But my opinion is, if you do a job and you do it poorly and people are injured, yes, you are liable. And but if you're not liable and there's an accident happens because of the person, then no, you're not liable. So no, we need to look at these laws, reevaluate them, determine what needs to be changed. Unfortunately, sometimes there's laws on the books that no longer work. And this is one I would definitely look at before I make decisions what need to be done to change it.
Okay, Assemblyman Lalor. The scaffold law enacted in the late 19th century holds property owners, employers, and contractors absolutely liable for gravity-related injuries that happen on the job. This means there is virtually no defense from a lawsuit, even if the worker's gross negligence contributed to an accident. New York is the only state that still keeps this law and is estimated to cost taxpayers $785 million annually. Would you support legislation to reform the scaffold law?
I absolutely would. I've been a sponsor or co-sponsor of scaffold law repeal over the years. I've had great conversations with chamber members at chamber events about the benefits of repealing the scaffold law. There's a big reason why it doesn't happen. And the big reason is the way Albany operates. Lobbyists hold a lot of sway in Albany. The trial lawyer lobby, who represent employees who are injured in elevation-related accidents, make a lot of money. The employee might not make that much money, but the trial lawyers certainly make a ton of money. They keep this law in place. And the real negative thing about the scaffold law is an employee can come to work drunk, fall off a ladder, injure himself significantly, and despite the employee's intoxication, the employer is liable for the damages. And often the expression death by 1,000 cuts is used to describe the business environment in New York State. Well, when it comes to infrastructure projects, when it comes to construction projects, the scaffold law is one big gash in those death by 1,000 cuts. It should have been repealed a long time ago. If we're looking around at a 100-year-old law that 49 other states don't have, that should be a telltale sign. Meanwhile, we have outmigration, we have a 49th, 48th, sometimes 50th business climate. It should have been repealed 10 years ago. It's always a priority of mine to repeal it. We need to win some hearts and minds and fight off a very well-funded lobby, but it's definitely a fight worth having.
Okay, Assemblyman Lalor, do you support a ban on fracking in New York State? What is your solution to drive down the energy costs within the state?
No, I don't support a ban on fracking. I think that the ban on fracking that was instituted 7 or 8 years ago by Governor Cuomo and his health department has done irreparable damage to the economy in certain parts of this state. Certain parts of the state that border on Pennsylvania, where they have to look across the border and see boom times in Pennsylvania and almost recession or possibly depression era times on the New York side of the border. The science wasn't good on the fracking ban. There was some Hollywood hysteria and some debunked documentaries about the impact on water supply. But one of the reasons that we have become energy independent as a country, which has great financial benefits to our country, it also has great geopolitical benefits to our country. It hurts Russia, for example, for us to be harnessing our own natural resources, including natural gas and fracked energy. New York should have been a part of it. The tax revenues to school districts in certain parts of the state, to the state treasury, would have been enormous. It's a huge missed opportunity, but not something that we couldn't revisit now that the science and it has been much more publicized and the hysteria has died down. Energy costs are high for the same reason the cost of business everywhere is high. We built a natural gas plant. We didn't, but a natural gas plant was built in Dover. And I met with the people who built it, and they said this project, exact same project, took 2 years to get permitted in Ohio. In New York State, it took 5 years to get permitted. Ultimately, we got to the same place, but it took 3 more years, which means 3 more years of expense, 3 more years of lawyers, 3 more years of adding to the cost of producing the energy, which of course is passed along to the consumer. So changing the permitting process and expediting it while maintaining safety should be a goal.
Okay, Ms. Giardino, do you support a ban on fracking in New York State? What is your solution to drive down the energy costs in that state, in the state of New York?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I do support a ban on fracking. As we have seen, like in the state of Oklahoma, that doesn't even have a fault line, every day now they have earthquakes because of fracking. We are only starting to understand the damage fracking does to an area, to the water, to the land, and to the community. One of the things we could do for our energy is one of the fastest growing jobs, green jobs. We could use other venues to increase our energy sources here in the state, which will be safer and cleaner for our area and for our community. And as I said, it is the fastest growing job market now, is green jobs. So by building more solar, more wind, and the Hudson River has a phenomenal tide hydro. As we're seeing, we're also building off of the Long Island, more windmills. And these are all ways we can improve our energy sources. Fracking is a disaster. It's been a disaster in other states. And the people are suffering because of it. I don't want the people of New York to suffer the same way Oklahoma and other states have suffered. I don't want to pollute our waters. I don't want to cause earthquakes. I don't want to make sure we have clean air and clean water in our state. So yeah, I ban fracking.
Okay, Ms. Giardino, in your view as a candidate, what are the most immediate areas you see that need to be addressed that are having an effect on the business climate and our state's competitiveness? Additionally, what pieces of legislation would you propose to address such issues? The key word being immediate.
Immediate. Well, there's nothing immediate in government. First of all, we need to have enough programs to help small businesses. So we do have several programs like low interest grant loans. We have Dutchess Community College has a training program for employees. We need to set up programs to help companies with technical. Main thing is infrastructure with broadband. Many areas in my district don't have excellent Wi-Fi. And when you own a small business, you know how important the internet is. So we need to work on our infrastructure to bring about broadband, to improve our roads, to improve our water systems here. So there's a lot that needs to be done. There is not one thing that will help small businesses. It is going to be a cumulative effect. Building better roads, improving public transportation. And as we do this, we create jobs, the economy grows, small businesses grow. These are the things we need to look at. And we need to look at more programs. I want to work with the chamber and work with their small businesses in our community and sit down with them and find out what they need to help them grow and work on getting that legislation passed. I want to be a conduit between the state and our local community. So these are things I want to work on. As an immediate, there is none immediately. There's so many things we need to do to help small businesses, and I want to hear from them what they need to have done.
Assemblyman Lalor, in your view as a candidate, what are the most immediate areas you see that need to be addressed that are having an effect on the business climate and our state's competitiveness? Additionally, what pieces of legislation would you propose to address such issues?
Spending, taxation are the biggest economic problems that we have. high spending leads to high taxation. I have for several years now proposed an idea where we would take the multi-billion-dollar portion of our budget that goes to handpicked corporations that I discussed before, and instead of giving it to a handful of handpicked corporations, immediately turn that multi-billion-dollar pool of funds into across the board tax relief for all taxpayers, both individuals and businesses. If you did that, that would be one of the largest tax cuts in New York State history. It would put money in the pockets of not only individuals and consumers, it would put money in the pockets of small businesses to expand, to hire employees, to improve their facility, which would lead to more economic growth. And even more immediately, there have been businesses in this pandemic that have been shut down. They were thriving businesses. I'll give you a great example. Across the street is the Civic Center. Right before the pandemic started, I went to a comedy show, Sebastian Maniscalco, hysterical. He did 4 or 5 shows here in Poughkeepsie. The town was booming. Sunday night, you couldn't get a seat in the restaurants within a half mile of the Civic Center. Things were going great. The pandemic came, closed down live venues like that. They're still closed down. The Chance is a great live venue. They're still closed down. Well, when the government tells you you can't operate your business, that's a taking. That's a taking under our Constitution. It's an eminent domain taking. I think those businesses should be compensated, and that funding should come from 2 places. Every non-designated penny that Empire State Development has should go to compensate those businesses that have been shut down because of the pandemic. And we also have a plan, in Albany's great wisdom, to make taxpayers pay for the robodials for campaigns that you hate. We have taxpayer-funded campaigns coming down the pike, not in this cycle. It's estimated to cost during a 4-year cycle $330 million. That's going to go to campaign consultants and robodials, as I mentioned. I think it should go to small business, and in particular to small businesses directly impacted and shut down by the government in the pandemic.
Okay, Assemblyman Lalor. Service businesses and manufacturers are in desperate need of skilled labor to maintain competitiveness. There needs to be more investment in soft skills and vocational training, as well as apprenticeship programming. What can you do as Assembly member to provide increased investment focus in these areas of our labor force?
Yeah, great idea. A positive that I've seen on this front and an encouraging development that I've seen on this front. For years, I went to the career day at the local high schools. Always a fun event. See, young high school students thinking about what career path they're going to take, but they never had the trades at these career days. Now, you'll see the carpenters there. You'll see the operating engineers there. You'll see the plumbers there. I don't know why this happened over a couple of generations, but there became a stigma against working with your hands versus the bachelor's degree, college, office work path. We need to fight against that stigma. We need to have real job training and trade programs, also nursing programs. We have an aging population in this country, in this state, and especially in this area. Healthcare, it's big now. It's only going to get bigger. We should have more programs in high schools and in community college. Those are the 2 areas where we can really shape this that will prepare people to immediately take those jobs, to graduate from high school and get a healthcare job, to graduate with an associate's degree without the massive debt that comes with a bachelor's degree, and immediately get a good paying job where you can pay your rent, pay your mortgage, support your family at some point in the near future. Those are the places to do that. Now, we have had programs. We had a welding program at BOCES where students were getting a welding certificate, but they couldn't weld and they couldn't get a job. So sometimes what we do in government is we set up a program, we fund it, and we say, look, we funded this welding program, for example. But if at the end of the day, the student who takes the welding program is not qualified to get a job welding because the instruction hasn't been that good and hasn't been adequate, then we have not only failed that student, we failed the taxpayer because we taxed them to get this inadequate education. So not only do we need to set the goal, set up the programs, we need to oversee them and make sure the end result is the result that we want and that we need.
Okay, Ms. Giardino. Service businesses and manufacturers are in desperate need of skilled labor to maintain competitiveness. There needs to be more investment in soft skills and vocational training, as well as apprenticeship programming. What can you do as Assembly member to provide increased investment focus in these areas of our labor force?
Thank you. I've been speaking for years now about the importance of trades in our high schools and colleges. 60% of the trade jobs in this country go unfilled. And when I heard that, that's when I decided we need to have these back in our high school and colleges. As we see with the COVID-19, how many people have lost their job permanently? If we had these programs in our colleges now, they could be going there and learning a good trade. And I believe the trade should start in freshman year. And I said before, and when they become a junior, they'll go to school in the morning and work with a master tradesman. They will learn their trade from an expert. And when they become by the 20s, they'll finish their apprenticeship and have a good job. These are programs, not only with the trade, we need technical and medical training in the state, and especially here in Dutchess County. Some of the medical school classes, you have to go over to Middletown to take them. We need to have them here at Dutchess. These are some things I believe in. I've been fighting for several years and speaking out. BOCES is doing a great job, but not good enough. They need to increase their classes. So yeah, we need to set up programs working with master tradespeople, having them work with our young people, teaching them the proper way to do the job so they are skilled. And those are the programs I would like to start, I've been talking about, and one of the first things on my agenda when I go to Albany.
Ms. Giardino, at the last minute, industries were left out of the governor's reopening plan, leaving many without reopening guidance, clarity, or knowing what the plan is for allowing them to reopen. Businesses have been completely abandoned and ignored, while questions of the governor's office and Empire State Development have gone months and months without being replied to or even acknowledged. What can you do as Assembly member to encourage the governor to offer communication to these industries and provide a plan to these businesses for reopening?
Yeah, I agree that I would be a conduit with the governor. I will sit and talk to these businesses who are now still closed and find out what they need, making sure they can reopen safely. And I would go to the governor's office and bring forward a plan, what needs to be done. These businesses need to find a very safe way to open so they can have their workers and serve the community and have economic growth. Unfortunately, this pandemic took us by surprise. It was a pandemic we haven't seen in 100 years. And so what we needed to do to save people's lives and to keep our communities safe was brand new. And yes, we all made mistakes and we all did a great job also. So now we need to take a time. I will take the time working with the chamber. I will take time to talk to the businesses. And I will definitely go before the governor and sit down with a plan to help these businesses reopen. For we need them. We need them to be in our community. We need them to help our community grow. And we need to have jobs for our people here in the community. So yeah, I would be definitely speaking with the governor on what we need to do to help these businesses.
Assemblyman Lalor, at the last minute, industries were left out of the governor's reopening plan, leaving many without reopening guidance, clarity, or knowing what the plan is for allowing them to reopen. Businesses have been completely abandoned and ignored, while questions of the governor's office and Empire State Development have gone months and months without being replied to or even acknowledged. What can you do as Assembly member to encourage the governor to offer communications to these industries and provide a plan for those businesses to reopen?
We made a grave mistake here in New York State in early March as the pandemic was starting to unfold. In the middle of the night, in classic Albany fashion, we rushed through a bill that would give the governor almost absolute power here in New York State. He can suspend or alter any state or local law for the next year or for a year from when this was first passed. It was overwhelmingly passed because of the fear, and it was tied to funding to vote for the pandemic. A handful of people, including myself, voted against it because we saw what was going to happen. The centralization of power, not only does it corrupt, but it leads to a lack of unresponsiveness. One of the great failures of New York State during the pandemic was the unemployment system. People were put out of work, they were entitled to unemployment, and they couldn't navigate the website to get unemployment. Our office fielded hundreds and hundreds of calls to deal with that. One good thing that the governor's office did to deal with this was set up a back channel where lawmakers could call on behalf of a constituent and essentially refile their unemployment claim and get the process moving, get the person paid their unemployment claim. We needed the same set up for small businesses to get guidance, where we could have, as an assembly office, the Chamber of Commerce should have been, not just elected officials, Chamber of Commerce and other officials should have had a way to bypass the bureaucracy to get direct, quick answers. To the extent we did that as part of our constituent services, but it should have been set up in a more formal manner to make sure that those lines of communication were set up. The big thing that we did wrong was the burden was on the business after it was shut down to prove that we could do it safely. That was not only unjust, but a bad economically destructive practice. The burden should have been on the state, the governor's office, to say this particular business cannot be run safely during this pandemic, therefore you're shut down. It was done the opposite way. The burden of proof and the burden of persuasion with a lack of communication were put on the small business for them to try to stay open and essentially try to survive. God forbid this ever happens again. It should be, you stay open unless the government proves that there's a health reason, a major health reason why you cannot stay open.
Okay, Assemblyman Lalor, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the restaurants have taken advantage of the state liquor authority relaxation of guidance. Would you support legislation making the relaxed guidelines permanent? Why or why not?
I would support a relaxation of those guidelines. You know, down on Route 9 in my district, right on the Wappinger-Fishkill border where the Farm to Table restaurant is, the marquee outside the plaza says, freedom is essential. Not only is freedom essential to us as Americans, freedom produces good results. When restaurant owners and all business owners, but we're talking about restaurants specifically, when they were giving the latitude to say, hey, listen, you got to find a way to survive. You can put a tent in your parking lot. You can reconfigure how you do your whole operation. Some of these burdens are being lifted. They figured it out to the extent possible, and they're making it work every day. And that shows you that the central planner in Albany does not know what's best for the restaurant in Wappinger. They don't know what's best for the business in Dutchess County. In many cases, they've never been a restaurant owner. I'd say in most cases. So within reason, unless it causes some kind of a public health risk or a public safety risk, the business owner, the restaurant owner, should have the latitude to innovate and come up with ways to make their business better, make it more profitable, provide a better service. And I think this one silver lining of this pandemic is giving restaurants those freedoms, which they needed to survive, shows that there hasn't been a negative result. Some people want to eat outside, they can eat outside. They feel safer outside. You want to eat in a restaurant, you can eat in the restaurant. They're innovating. I've even heard of one business owner that said, well, when we open up, we're not going to sit, we can't sit, every table. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sell advertising to make up the lost revenue on the tables where I can't seat patrons. I'm going to sell some advertising there, or I'm going to give some advertising to a not-for-profit or to a business friend that is, somebody who could use some help. And that shows the innovation of the private sector. The public sector can never innovate like that. The business trying to survive is going to be the most innovative. Even in non-desperate times, we should give businesses the opportunity to innovate the way they're doing right now in the restaurant business.
Okay, Ms. Giardino. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the restaurants have taken advantage of the state liquor authority relaxation of guidelines. Would you support legislation making these relaxed guidelines permanent? Why or why not?
Yes, I do support it. This is important that these businesses are successful, and it also increases business for them and jobs. They also, as long as they can continue to open safely, that's all I care about, and follow the CDC guidelines during the COVID-19 right now. But after the pandemic is over and we find that it doesn't interfere in any way of safety or cause a health hazard in any way, I'm all for it. In fact, I love going out and sitting outside and eating at the restaurant. I love it. And so, yeah, I support these guidelines. It's important that we help our local businesses to grow, help them in any way we can to succeed. And this relax on the law, yeah, it's very important. And it is something I do support.
Okay, Ms. Giardino. Given the large budget deficit New York State is facing, how do you propose the state should fix this problem? Should new revenue measures be enacted and/or should cost-cutting measures be taken?
That's a good question. First of all, I do not want in any way to increase any taxes on the middle class and small businesses. What I really want to do is decrease it for them. We need to look at our different programs and see how we could tighten the budget. But my biggest thing is what we need to do, and economists have agreed, is the ultra rich in this state and the multi-billionaires and ultra billionaires have not paid in years their fair share. They've benefited from our shoulders between the infrastructure, education, and programs we offer them. And they haven't contributed enough money to support them. I'm tired of our small businesses and middle class carrying them. It's time they stepped up to the bat and played ball. So the first thing I want to do in Albany is work with my fellow members and change the tax code so the ultra billionaires and the multi-billionaires start contributing to this state, which they so greatly benefit from, and take the burden off of the working class and the business people. And these are the things how we could fix it. The economists have said if they pay their fair share, we would not have the economic problems we have now here in New York State.
Assemblyman Lalor, given the large budget deficit New York State is facing, how do you propose the state should fix this problem? Should new revenue measures be enacted and/or should cost-cutting measures be taken?
New York State does not have a revenue problem. New York State now has a smaller population than Florida, and we have a significantly smaller population than the state of Texas. Yet our state budget is significantly more than those two states. Think about that. Millions of more people in Texas, yet our state budget is greater than the budget of Texas. One of the reasons Florida surpassed us in population size is New Yorkers fleeing the state because of the spending burden, because of the tax burden. So it gets back to our spending problem. This governor, since he's been governor, has taken a bow for only increasing the size of the annual budget by 2%, which is better than increasing it by 5%, certainly. However, the budget 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, go back before I was born, was bloated here in New York State. So adding 2% every year to a bloated budget is not efficient. It leads to this horrible business climate, this horrible tax climate, and the out-migration. The things that I would do is we had to start thinking differently in New York State. I learned a valuable lesson my first year in the Assembly. It was November or December, and somebody from the Assembly staff, Republican Assembly staff, came to me and said, Assemblyman Lalor, you haven't spent your mail budget. You're entitled to $50,000 a year to send out mail to tell your constituents how great you are. Basically what it amounts to. You better spend it. You have to spend it by the end of the year. You have to spend it in the next 2 months. So let's get a mail piece together and get it out there. And I said, well, I've already said everything I want to say. We live in a even 8 years ago, a social media era, lots of radio opportunities. There's other ways besides taxing the taxpayer. $50,000, that could be somebody's salary that we're giving to every assembly member. And as a member of the minority and as a more junior member, especially back then, my mail budget is a lot smaller than other members. But that kind of thinking, you have to spend this money that you took from businesses in the Chamber of Commerce, that you took from this retired couple in taxation. You have to hurry up and spend it. Maybe you don't even want to spend it. Maybe you don't have anything to say, but you have to hurry up and spend it. That kind of thinking, that we have to spend every penny that isn't nailed down, is what's destroying New York State. We've got to totally change the thinking.
Assemblyman Lalor, the governor recently replaced the entire board of commissioners on the New York State Bridge Authority. Many believe this is a backdoor way of getting what he truly wanted, merging that agency with the Thruway Authority. Do you support his decision? Why or why not?
I don't support his decision. I opposed it when it was being discussed earlier in the year. We temporarily halted that merger. I believe that's not only a power grab, but a money grab. I'm for consolidating when it leads to efficiencies and benefits the public. But here we have a well-functioning bridge authority, self-sustaining based on reasonable tolls. I love paying $1.75 or $1.50, depending if I remember my Easy Pass when I cross the bridge. No, but it's pretty reasonable. You go further south and you're going to get hit a lot more. So we have a bridge authority that's working financially and otherwise, and then we have a thruway authority that's not working. If the merger was to make the thruway authority more efficient like the bridge authority and run better, if that was the goal, then maybe I'd be for it. But that's not the goal. What we have is we have a dysfunctional entity trying to gobble up a functional entity to try to feed the beast of the thruway authority. I think it's a terrible idea. Now, that change has to be done legislatively. And yes, we fought it off in this budget back in March, the 2020-2021 budget. But what I've learned in Albany is a bad idea never dies. It always comes back. So when the three men got in the room and negotiated this budget, actually two men and a woman now, got in the room, that was a chip that the governor decided he would pull out of the pot and not get it this time. But he's going to come back for it again. We have to stay vigilant against it. I think changing the board was a step in that direction. I think he's confident that he's going to get the merger. And then when he does, he'll automatically have his own hand-picked board in there ready to do his bidding. Terrible idea. We need to oppose it. It's one of the great bipartisan things that we did this year was Republicans and Democrats in Hudson Valley came together and opposed the governor on this. We have to stay vigilant. It would be a terrible thing if that merger went through.
Mr. Giardino, the governor recently replaced the entire Board of Commissioners on the New York State Bridge Authority. Many believe this is a backdoor way of getting what he truly wanted, merging that agency with the Thruway Authority. Do you support his decision? Why or why not?
No, I don't support it. I think it's a very bad idea. As Laura has said, the Bridge Authority is doing a great job and continue to do so. The Thruway, we really need to have a look at what they're doing, have some professional management come in, evaluate what they're doing wrong and how we can improve it. And that's what I like to work on. I would definitely vote against having this happen. And I believe that we need to keep them separate. The Thruway needs to be looked at. We need to make sure that whoever's in charge, we cut the corners, do whatever we need to make it work far more better than it's doing right now.
Mr. Giardino, school tax bills will be going out in a month. Actually, I already have mine. And many businesses have stated that they don't have the revenue to pay these bills. What do you propose should happen in the event that businesses are unable to meet this obligation due to the on-pause closure? And what will you do to ensure our schools will still receive revenue for continuity of operations?
Well, first, we need more revenue from the federal government for our educational system. That's number one. For every dollar we pay to the federal government, we only get 90 cents back, where other states get $2, $2.50, or $3. They're getting our money. So that's number one I'd want to do, is making sure we start getting back some of our own money. Number two, what I want to do for the businesses and for even homeowners, to allow them to work out a payment plan. And sit down, I'd like to sit down and also talk with the business owners. What can we do to help them be able to pay this bill? I take away all penalties, all interest against them, and work with them to have a plan that will help them pay these bills without them being penalized. And we also need to start looking at other venues for our school bills, school tax. We can't keep putting the burden on property owners. We need to look at other venues to find ways to help pay our school taxes. So yeah, I would definitely work with homeowners and business owners to find a way to help them pay this bill in a way that's convenient for them without putting a burden on them and not taking away any penalties or interest during this period of time. We're all being stressed right now from COVID-19, and I don't want to make a further burden for them. So these are things I would work with the county, with the state, with business owners and homeowners, finding a comfortable venue to handle this.
Okay, school tax bills will be going out in a month, and many businesses have stated that they don't have the revenue to pay these bills. What do you propose should happen in the event that businesses are unable to meet this obligation due to the on-pause closure? And what will you do to ensure our schools will receive revenue for continuity of operations?
Huge problem. This is a problem that's under-discussed. You have businesses that went under during the worst part of the pandemic, and you have commercial landlords who no longer have a tenant, or they had a tenant that was shut down, therefore they weren't getting any rent. And what happened in the private sector is a good example of what could happen in the public sector. What happened in those cases where you had a business shut down and they owed rent was the landlord got together with the tenant and said, listen, you're going to be shut down for 3 months. Let's take that 3 months of rent that you're not paying. Let's divide it by 12, and you could pay us back your rent plus 1/12 of the amount that you didn't pay during those 3 months, and we'll spread out your payments a little bit. That's a good model, more or less, for the schools. We shouldn't have penalties. We shouldn't have interest. I mean, how do you tell a restaurant that was shut down for a few months, hey, you have to pay your bill. And you have to pay it in 1 or 2 installments, not monthly like your rent. You have to pay a big chunk. Often these are 5 or 6 figure payments, depending on the value and the size of the property. Reminds me of what we're doing right now. If something doesn't change, it reminds me of one of my favorite movies, Goodfellas, when he talks about how the loan sharks work. I'm going to clean this up a little bit, but he says, oh, your business slow? Too bad, pay me. Had a fire? Too bad, pay me. That's what we're saying right now. The tax man is saying to our to all taxpayers, and in particular to our commercial landlords with their school bills, we should work out a payment plan, penalty free. This is an unprecedented problem. The school district does not want that business to go under and never get paid, but to spread it out, and ultimately schools have to get paid to pay their bills. So it should be paid, but we need to be able to spread it out penalty free. And the other thing I would say, and the state could do this, and actually the governor has the power to do this right now because we've given him so much power. He should use that power to do something useful. He should tell school districts, hey, here you can, for the next year, you can not be mandated to do all the unfunded mandates or carve out a couple of unfunded mandates that they are free from being mandated to do for the next year or the next 2 years. And that would help them on the financial side, on the school district side. And they can absorb the fact that a taxpayer is spreading out their tax bill over the course of the year.
This will be our last question before closing remarks. Goes to Assemblyman Lalor. Will you support a legislation proposal to impose public works prevailing wage standards on private sector projects receiving state or local economic development assistance? Why or why not?
I would not support that. I think we have a problem with the current prevailing wage structure. In certain parts of the state, in New York City, for example, the current prevailing wage on public projects increases the cost of the project by 25%. So it costs 25% more in some parts of this state to build a project because of prevailing wage. Now we're looking to expand that to private sector development that might have some benefits from a local IDA. That would be a terrible idea. It's going to impact housing. Why are you going to build a private housing project if it's going to cost you more? You're not going to build it. You're just not going to build it. And the cost of housing, because of the decrease in the volume of housing and the availability of housing, the cost of housing is going to go up. So we think we're solving a problem by increasing or expanding prevailing wage, but we're actually causing a problem. And the problem is going to hurt lower income people more who can't find affordable housing. Affordable housing advocates are against this. Contractors are against this. The NAACP is against this. So you have people right, middle, and center who are against this terrible idea. Again, you have powerful special interests in Albany who are pushing for this. This was a bad idea before the pandemic. New York is already on the ropes. If this were to pass, it would be a knockout punch for New York, which we might never recover from.
Mr. Giardino, well, this will be your last question, then we'll go right to your closing remarks.
Okay.
Would you support a legislation proposal to impose public works prevailing wage standards on private sector projects receiving state or local economic development assistance? Why or why not?
Well, first of all, I believe everybody should be paid a living wage. And if this means for them to get a living wage, yes, I would be supported. Because when workers have money, the economy grows. They spend money in the communities, they spend money with businesses. When we have a living wage, it makes a difference for our economy, it makes a difference for our community, it makes a difference for our small businesses. Yes, they might be paying more business workers, but Henry Ford was a brilliant businessman, and one thing he did was pay his workers a good salary so they could buy the car they created. And by buying that car they created, they drove it around the neighborhood, people saw it, and other people bought it. By paying people a living wage, it helps our economy grow. It helps our community grow. It raises our taxes. It brings more taxes into our community. So yeah, I believe in paying anyone a good, livable wage.
Ms. Giardino, I welcome you to your closing remarks.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak with the chamber members and guests about the issues facing our community and businesses. The coronavirus has put a devastating burden on our community and businesses economically and especially a human toll with the loss of life and for many, their health. I will work with the Chamber and its members to increase the number of businesses to reopen safely, ensure there are programs to help them, and I will take your concerns to Governor Cuomo. Another concern I have is our educational system, to bring trade programs to our high schools and colleges, giving people the opportunity to learn a trade and have a good job and a future. The coronavirus had a major impact on businesses and workers. Millions of workers lost their jobs, and many of them permanently. This only reinforces the importance of having a trade and technical programs in our colleges. We need low-cost public college to give everyone an opportunity to attend a state college. When we have highly educated, skilled workforce, the economy grows and businesses have skilled workers. Many of these workers will open their own businesses, which will create more jobs and help our economy grow. I support the New York Health Act, for it benefits small businesses, for they will no longer have to spend valuable hours trying to find a health plan for themselves and their workers. This time can be used for other important work. Small businesses will save money, which can they use to reinvest in their business, for they no longer have to pay outrageous premiums of $2,000, $3,000 or more with extremely high deductibles. The New York Health Act is an affordable health insurance that is based on a sliding scale, no deductibles, and a comprehensive coverage. These are just a few of the programs I want to work on in Albany to help our businesses and community and have an open door policy for anyone who needs assistance. Thank you.
Assemblyman Lalor, just as soon as we have this set, we'll allow you 3 minutes on the clock.
All right. Thanks, Frank, for moderating. Thanks to the Chamber for hosting, especially for the sponsors for sponsoring this event. Great exchange of ideas, great conversation early in the morning here. Spending, as I said earlier, is the biggest problem that we have in this state. State spending is what's crushing small business. Regulation, I would put in second place, very serious, but spending is number one. And one thing I learned in my time in the Marine Corps is leadership from the front. The first person, the first Marine off the helicopter onto the battlefield isn't the private, it's the senior most Marine on the helicopter. And leadership from the front means if you're going to advocate things for the state, you have to do those things yourself. So I mentioned earlier, the $50,000 a year that New York State wants to give me to send out mail to tell the world how excellent I am, and really taxpayer-funded re-election is what it is. I've never taken part of that since my first year. I spent half of it my first year and then none of it the subsequent 7 years. That's $375,000 in saving. The taxpayers, because of the way Albany operates, they want to pay, and they do pay, if you live more than 50 miles from Albany, they want to pay you to drive to Albany. They want to feed you while you're up there. They want to house you if you don't want to drive home. I'm only 96 miles, so I commute every day. But it works out to an average of $12,000 taxpayer spend a year on travel and another $12,000 or so on food and housing for lawmakers up in Albany. And frankly, no good can come from a whole bunch of lawmakers spending a lot of time in hotels and having their bar tab picked up by the taxpayers. But it's a huge amount of money, $24,000 a year. I've never taken any of that. You multiply that by 8 years. So here's my tiny little part of state government. Me, my small office, one full-time staffer and 2 part-time staffers. And we're saving, in 8 years that I've been in the Albany, been in the Assembly, we've saved the taxpayers about $1 million. We're a fraction of a percent of the New York State budget. But if everybody applied these same ideas, if everybody looked for savings, you know, when I was first elected, I had to pick out an office and you had to give 3 bids. You had to get 3 bids. So somebody told me, actually a Republican predecessor told me, you know what you do? You find the office you like and then find 2 offices that cost more and you'll get the office you like. Game the system, spend more tax dollars. And that is the thinking from Albany. Unfortunately, on both sides of the aisles, in many cases, that is the thinking. Spend every dollar you can to your own benefit. We have to change those thinking. I've changed it in my own office. If we applied that across the board to New York State, the feds would be coming to New York for a bailout. We'd have so much money. And it wouldn't be cutting bone. You'd be cutting the massive amounts of fat in state budgets. It would be a total game changer for New York State. We'd have a renaissance here. It could be done immediately. It doesn't even take legislation. Just takes a change in thinking.
Assemblyman Lalor, Laurette, Giardino, on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to once again thank both of you for taking time to participate in our forum today and share your views on how to move our state forward. Regardless of who our next Assembly member turns out to be, you need to know that your Dutchess County Regional Chamber of Commerce extends its fullest resources to their office. We look forward to working with both of you, and I offer our gratitude to both candidates for their willingness to take on the challenges our state is faced with.